Okay, why don't we get started? So, welcome to today's webinar, a payroll transformation checklist, what to look at before embarking on a project. A bit of a mouthful, but it is a big topic that we want to share with you today, some perspective on. My name is Marc-Oliver, Fiedler. I'm the CEO of Payzaar, and I'm joined today by Trevor Townsend, who's the COO of Payzaar. And if you haven't heard about Payzaar yet, Payzaar is a new innovative global payroll solution that helps multinational companies to manage all their global payroll processes and all their global payroll data in one central platform. And we can provide that kind of central payroll management solution with essentially any local payroll solution that you may have in place, either your existing local payroll partners, your in-house local payroll teams, or new payroll partners that you want to put in place. And you can find more about Payzaar by looking at our website at payzaar.com. What we want to talk to you about today is a topic that we've been dealing with a lot with our clients over the last few years. We have worked on dozens of global payroll transformation projects. And the idea for this webinar is to share some of the learnings, some of the best practices that we've observed as we've managed these projects together with our clients, and give people out there who are thinking about embarking on a transformation project a little bit of an idea what to think about, what to pay attention to make sure that this kind of project is well supported within the organization, goes off without a hitch. But before we jump in, just a few quick housekeeping items. All the lines during the webinar have been muted. If you do have a question, you can post them in the chat or QA part of the webinar here at the bottom of your screen. We will have time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. We're planning to spend probably about 30-40 minutes on sharing some slides, walking through some slides, and then you will have time for Q&A. And we will also, this webinar is being recorded, so we will also share the recording of this webinar after the session over the next couple of days. So with that out of the way, let's dive in. So here is what we will cover today, which is essentially the key steps, the key milestones in your plan to prepare for the launch of a transformation initiative. A payroll transformation is a big endeavor. There's lots of different stakeholders that typically need to be involved and brought on board. Lots of processes, lots of different parts in the organization that get touched and impacted by such a transformation. And let's face it, payroll is a mission critical function within any organization. You need to make sure that you pay your employees properly and on time, and running such a transformation while you're still needing to ensure that your employees are getting paid properly is no easy undertaking. It's a bit like building the plane or upgrading your plane while you're flying it at the same time. So you want to be very meticulous and very focused on how you're getting into this sort of transformation project. And so what we'll talk about today is 4 key steps along the way, starting off with understanding your baseline, where you're starting off from. And secondly, how to think about setting your goals, what you want to achieve. From there, how to look at different solution options that you can consider, how you transform your payroll operations. And finally, very importantly, how to make sure you get the appropriate support and buy-in from the rest of the organization to help you execute that transformation initiative. And then at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. So to get us started, Trevor, maybe if you want to come in here and get us kicked off on the first step in a transformation initiative, understanding your starting point, and share with the group here a little bit the key points about that first step in the process.
Great, thanks, Mark. I'm delighted to be speaking to everyone again today. I suppose what this is all about is getting into the start gate, right? Because ultimately, you want to create an initiative around your payroll, global payroll transformation, your global payroll process improvement, global payroll change. But you're going to need some budget, you're going to need some resources, and you're going to need to get that signed off within the organization somewhere. So what we're going to really focus on today is not necessarily the execution of the transformation, but how do you get to the start gate? How do you get to the start gun to start the process? So you might be at different stages in your career and also in your career at the organization. You know, maybe you've recently joined the organization and you're trying to find out the mechanics of how do decisions get made around here? Who do I need to influence to back different initiatives? You might have recently been promoted into a role, and now you're responsible for global or regional payroll or multi-country payroll within the organization. You're figuring out, well, you know, I've been around here a little while, I'm frustrated by how things are currently working. Also, you want to make an impact in the organization. You've been promoted, you have some good ideas about the future, what the future payroll model could look like, and you want to start to make some moves. You may be, you may be operating on a very selfish basis where you say, well, actually, the next thing I need to put on my resume or my CV is payroll transformation. I need to demonstrate to the wider market, if I go looking for my next job, that I have a stamp, I've done this thing, I've implemented it, and I've implemented it successfully in the organization. But one of the key things we kind of need to recognize is that through this process, to generate those benefits for the organization, to generate those benefits for your team and for you personally, for your own professional development, you know, change is not something we do every day. And in fact, humans are, you know, predisposed to be change resistant. So one of the things we got to do is, if we don't have that change muscle memory, is to start to look at how do we build our change agenda and how do we make it successful. And it's kind of like getting your ducks in a row internally first before you engage the wider organization. So I suppose what we're looking at on this slide here is essentially getting your ducks in a row, situation assessment, and understanding either if you're new to the organization or if you've inherited a wider responsibility for global payroll, what's your current payroll delivery model? You know, how is payroll done in country? Is it a mix of outsourced payroll to individual in-country providers doing a really good job for you? Do you have maybe an aggregator at a regional level that's taking care of maybe a payroll for a region for you? Do you have some in-house payroll? So just to build up a good picture around your current model is very important. Just understand the basic blocking and tackling around how is it delivered, how many people are involved in it, how does the payroll organization interact with other parts of the business, and then ask your team what's working well. What's working not so well, you know, so that's very important to kind of focus on areas for improvement so that you can, you want to solve some problems so that your colleagues and yourself, you aren't, you know, working late nights through every payroll cycle, and you know you're holding the payroll process together by some good wishes and some sticky tape. Understanding the cost of running payroll, so both your internal and external costs, and sometimes that can be hard, especially when you have a mix of kind of maybe traditional global payroll aggregators, and you're getting invoices from the aggregator, and then you have to buy all of these local scope of services from your local payroll team. Some of those invoices may be settled by your local business unit. Some of them you might hold centrally. So getting a true cost, a true external cost of your global payroll operation is important, and then factoring in your internal costs around that as well, because some of these things may help you a little later as you start to formulate a business case. And then, with this in mind, I would say start to articulate a catalyst for change. What's the message for change within the payroll organization? So you're giving yourself that purpose, that message that you can sell to those outside of your team as you start to sell the initiative. So this is just basic blocking and tackling. And what I say to you, and it'll make sense as we go through this webinar, I wouldn't boil the ocean on this just yet to drain every last cent and understand every last single invoice in terms of your situation assessment, because there are some things over the course of this webinar that are going to be equally, in fact, maybe more important to you in terms of understanding the cultural dimension of change. So, Mark, if you could move us forward to the to this next slide, and we'll talk about some of the mechanics of the organization behavior and what are the change behaviors in the organization. So look, one of the things I mentioned earlier on is that people, individuals, organizations are change resistant. So if we think about companies that used to be phenomenally big, like Nokia, owned the cell phone market 15 years ago, and nowhere to be seen now, and everything is about that whole business is about making things smaller. You couldn't make phones bigger in that business, but like what we all want to do is we want to consume more on screens, hence the iPhone, hence the smartphone, and that market is obliterated. Now, there are people in Nokia at that point in time that understood what was coming along, but the organization was change resistant. People are change resistant. Your organization is change resistant. And it's not just me saying it, because this change resistance manifests itself in 70% of transformations failing. And one of the biggest reasons they fail is they never even get to the starting gate. They never, you don't get to the starting gun to even start that process of change. So some of the things that we'll talk about here today is understanding the organization change behaviors. And what I would recommend people look at to overcome this failure to launch is and to get to the starting gate is take a look at successful transformations and successful change initiatives around the organization and see what you can learn from that. What made those successful? Who led those change initiatives, and what can you learn from that? So talk to the people that pushed through something in the organization that was a significant change, and see if they'll, just meet them for coffee and talk to them about the informal approach that they made to building their case for change within the business. But also see if you can find people within the organization that tried to push through an initiative and it didn't get off the ground. All right, because you learn some things about that as well. Because ultimately, companies, you can't back every initiative, and whether you like it or not, you're going to be in competition with your colleagues for the scarce resource or restricted resource and the constrained resource that others that the organization have and other people will be competing for. So it's very, very important to try and learn what you can about the successes and failures of other initiatives, and then figure out what made them successful, and ultimately how do they influence the decision-making process. Because what that will help you to do is to figure out, well, for your particular initiative, who do I need to engage, what will that stakeholder need to see, and how can I make this transformation or this initiative successful based on aligning myself to what that stakeholder needs to see. So this is kind of the informal part of the cultural part of how do we do things around this business. That's very, very important to read. Now, we can all engage in very intellectual exercises and build amazing business cases. However, you got to pay attention to what's going on in the organization. And I think with those few thoughts, I think it's probably time to bring Mark into the conversation now and to think about the organizational context and some goals.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Trevor, for setting the stage. And I think, as you said, once you understand how things operate today, what the baseline is, your starting point. You've got your arms around the current status quo and the facts, and who are the influences in the organization and how processes run today. It is then very important to, with that understanding, start looking ahead and focus on what do we want to achieve, right? Why are we doing this transformation? What's the real ultimate objective that we're trying to attain here? That could be many different things. We see clients of all sizes and shapes that drive transformation for very different reasons. And on this slide, we just list a few of the ones that we fairly frequently come across. So it could be that as part of your payroll operations, you've grown, complexity has increased, you've added new countries, and now it's paramount for the organization to have better oversight, better control over what is happening across the payroll operations. It could be that, again, there's a focus on driving efficiency across the organization. Your footprint in terms of the number of employees that you need to support, the number of different jurisdictions that you're operating in keeps growing. Typically, the central budgets for managing back office functions like payroll do not grow with the same pace that the overall organization grows. So you need to find ways to get more productive, get more efficient. So that could be a motivator to start looking at what can we do differently from how we've done things in the past. It could have to do with compliance, right? So maybe there have been some challenges in the past in being compliant with all the regulations or all the internal business obligations that exist. Data security aspects that need to be considered. So that could be a big driver to further improve your payroll operations. Costs, of course, always a factor in pretty much all organizations. Cost focus. How do we manage to reduce the cost of running our business, especially in the current economic uncertain environment? Many organizations are very focused on how do they make the most out of their resources, get the most out of their resources. And then, we see clients that are now starting to realize increasingly how valuable the information is that exists in the payroll environment. So, we're sitting on, in the payroll world, we're sitting on this wealth of information about your employees, about the cost of operating the business. It's payroll or it's the salaries for your employees. In most organizations tend to be the largest or one of the largest cost blocks in the overall P&L for an organization. So we have all this data, and more organizations are starting to look at how can we make use of this data to make better decisions for the business. So that can be a big driver. We see organizations being very specifically focused on that aspect that actually exceeds and goes beyond sort of what's important, what's the interest from a payroll operations perspective, and also brings in stakeholders like, for example, finance and your senior executives that obviously are very invested in making sure that the overall organization is operating at the most efficient level. And I would actually add that to, one point to add to what Trevor mentioned earlier about taking inventory of what's your starting point, not just from the perspective of how are things being done within the payroll team and the payroll organization, but also very important to understand how your business partners that sit around payroll, HR, finance, how are they looking at payroll, and what are some of the opportunities for improvement that they're seeing will be very valuable to inform your path forward. And of course, let's also remember that at the end of the day, the end customer for payroll is the employee. So That could be another important focus, the improving the employee experience, providing them with a better service experience, better self-service, so that they have a great job experience in their role, and payroll is something that they actually appreciate. Now, it's easy to say all of these things are important, right? I want all of the above. But what we find is with transformation initiatives that really succeed, it is important to prioritize and be focused, right? Because otherwise you run the risk that you're trying to boil the famous ocean, you're trying to do too many things at the same time. Typically in a transformation project like this, there are trade-offs, and you do have to pick your battles. You do have to make tough decisions in terms of what solution really fits best the needs, and again, sort of the corporate context of the organization. And so understanding what you're really trying to achieve and being very specific about that is very important. This will also help, by the way, you're ultimately quantifying and crafting your business case. So the more you can turn these goals and objectives into quantifiable targets that you set for the organization. Hey, we want to improve the turnaround time for our payroll process by 10%. And here's a way how we think we can do that. That will then become sort of a rallying cry for the people that you need to get involved to get really focused on these objectives and make sure that everything you do aligns with that. Now, as you do that, it's very important to not just think about this sort of in isolation and vacuum, from just a pure sort of what's important here for us in a payroll environment perspective. Because payroll obviously lives within the broader organizational context. And so you need to understand what are the broader business strategy objectives, and how does this transformation that you're looking to initiate from a payroll point of view, how does that fit into your organization's overall business strategy? Is there a big drive to cost reduction? Well, if that's the case, for example, then probably as you're thinking about the transformation in your payroll context, you need to look at how can we help create more efficiency and cost reduction within our means in the payroll context. If you're looking at automating, for example, or digitizing your payroll operations, it's obviously very good to understand, is there a larger digital transformation strategy that's already going on in the organization? How can we fit into that? Can we piggyback right on some of the activities and some of the initiatives that are being put in place? And that's sort of a general point, not just relative to the digital transformation, but understanding other existing change initiatives that can impact your project, both in positive and potentially negative ways that can block your project because your project runs counter to those priorities, and is going to hence battle for resources, or initiatives that maybe are very much aligned with what you're trying to do in your payroll environment. And again, you can sort of ride on the coattails of those initiatives and leverage things that are already being implemented in the context of those initiatives. Tap into budget that maybe has already been set aside to execute those initiatives. So understanding what's going on around you and how your project really can make use of that, align with that broader context, is extremely important. Again, so you make sure that as you're setting off on this transformation, you are not swimming against the stream as much as possible. You want to swim with the stream and leverage all the supporters and all the other people that are driving initiatives around that transformation that you're setting out to do. So now we've talked about, we need to understand what our starting point is. We've talked about setting our goals and setting our targets, where we're trying to go from where we're setting off today. Next, let's talk a bit about what are the options? How can we get there? How do we think about that future state? And Trevor, I'm going to turn it back over to you to give us some ideas of different kind of solution models that are important to understand and consider?
Sure. Obviously, choosing the right solution is important, and there is kind of an organizational solution fit. There's the business problem you're trying to solve and the direct global payroll solution fit, and then there's just what can we get done, right? And sometimes it just comes down to making some of those trade-offs. So if we think about a desired future outcome, an example could be with some high-level themes here on greater control, scalability, standardization. It could be higher-level themes that we want to achieve as part of this change. And if we think about those, we think about, how could we move from our current global payroll model to a different payroll model that fits that organizational context? Well, there's different kind of models out there that we can think about, right? And we'll discuss in a moment how you access those through different vendor types. Many organizations have hybrid. So they've some in-house payroll, they've some third-party in-country providers that are independent on a country-by-country basis. They may have some regional providers out there, and one of our customers, for example, Blue Prism is exactly that case. And what they needed to do was to gain kind of control across that footprint quickly to give them the visibility and control around managing their payroll operations. They were expanding fast, they're a technology company, they were moving through the gears internationally, and they had a corporate centralized payroll function that was responsible to own that. But what they recognized was they wanted to keep some in-house payroll themselves because that was important for them for some of their larger populations. But ultimately, they wanted to operate to a standardized, controlled payroll approval process to support their, just good payroll and finance housekeeping. So that was one kind of model where they didn't necessarily want to move lock, stock, and barrel out to a third party traditional payroll global aggregator for everything. They just recognized the organizational context demanded speed and control and agility because they're growing quickly, but at the same time they wanted to keep control in-house over certain payroll. Some models are fully outsourced, so you fully outsource all of your payroll services to one central provider, and perhaps that's right for certain organizations. And in that case, some of the things that you need to contemplate when looking at that model is, well, what's the risk of disruption and what's the cost associated with that? What's the effort and resource? So if I'm kind of plotting, what could be successful as a payroll change in my organization, we might have that desire to go centralized and fully outsourced to a single vendor. But some of when I peel back some of the effort, resources, cost, time, risk of change and disruption, maybe the organization has a very low appetite for that risk of disruption and the resources that are going to be applied to a long project to rip out your existing payroll landscape and replace it with your traditional global aggregator solution. So again, the organization might want that, and they might have a desire for that central control, but has zero appetite for the disruption and the effort that comes with that. Maybe the organization is moving forward on a shared service basis, and the key priority for the shared service team is to put functions into the shared service center very, very quickly. And this is kind of, you look at some of the benefits of maybe some models suit that speed and agility and getting to the shared service center quickly so that the shared service center team can operate in a single hub platform, get a visibility across the span of control for their global payroll operations, without having to rip and replace their underlying payroll services, but also without having to engage in the local payroll systems. So, again, you could be able to, if the desired outcome is to get that shared service global payroll to a shared service center, hooking into that initiative is important, but again, balancing out risk and whatnot. And sometimes, the organization has zero appetite to look at the current payroll processes, but they might have appetite for some point solutions where they want better analytics, around global payroll data, to serve some very, very point solutions and very, very point problems. So one of our customers is a pharmaceutical business spanning 63 countries, 18,500 employees. And what they did a very point reporting problem that they were trying to solve around leave accruals, because obviously that impacts the financial accounts. But they had zero appetite to go and disturb the existing payroll landscape to do that. So when we talk about transformation, it's kind of like a double-edged sword in my perspective, because sometimes we think transformation is big and it's all encompassing, but it also can be, a much smaller change that delivers high impact, high value in a very short period of time by solving some of these global payroll analytics challenges that organizations have, like that customer of ours distributed across 63 countries. So we're able to help them with that. So there's very definitely the mapping of, what your desired future state would be around your global payroll model, with the organizational risk appetite and organization patience to support a long-running transformation, right? Because another reason why transformations fail is that you might get to the start gate, but you can't roll them out because it becomes very, very difficult and very, very hard. And the organization loses patience with these, multi-year transformation projects that maybe the solution is to do something more agile, more faster, because let's face it, cycle times that organizations are facing at the moment are shortening all of the time. You need to pick solutions that are scalable and attentive to the agility needs of the organization. Because, let's face it, payroll isn't necessarily synonymous with agility. And part of that is understandable because, the downside of getting it wrong, Mark spoke about them a little bit earlier, the downside of getting payroll wrong, the cost of that is very noisy in the organization. At the same time, I think if I was in a global payroll role, I'd be thinking to myself, well, how can I be seen to be agile? How can I deliver value to the organization? And are there some models out there that could help me with that? Maybe Mark, you want to flip forward, and we can take a quick look at some vendor options that are available. So, so I think sometimes when I think about what is a fully managed payroll service, a fully compliant payroll service, a lot I think of the traditional global aggregators will, I suppose, market that. But what we're seeing in recent years is kind of the emergence of what I would call a fully managed payroll service with a good compliance support services being delivered through some of the global accounting firms. And they have direct presence in countries all over the world. They have that compliance expertise. And that, for example, if compliance is a big organizational driver and the organization wants to pay away that risk, well, that could be a model that that might work for you. Of course, we've mentioned the traditional payroll aggregator model already, and I think that aggregator model has its merits, but it does come, as I mentioned, with a sizable amount of disruption and a sizable amount of I suppose transformation risk, and I think that needs to be evaluated. And again, I suppose what we're seeing, and to shamelessly plug Payzaar here, is if you're looking for a solution that maybe gets you some of those kind of global standardization around process, global data flows, integration, global analytics, and it does it all very, very quickly, the emergence of some of those models might attend to, a low risk appetite that the organization has, the ability to be able to reuse your existing payroll landscape, existing relationships, and be able to span across all of those models, like my in-house payroll, my third-party in-country providers, my best-of-breed providers, or some regional providers that we have. So when you look at these providers, you just need to make sure you don't cut against the grain of some of the organizational goals, those wider goals that Mark mentioned above, and attend to, you know, the agility, the agility and those reduced cycle times that organizations have. Because guess what? Every business now is just, you know, lower patience for those very long running traditional transformation type projects. And I think position yourself to take advantage of that is important. You know, and sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, having a tool that allows you to maybe start small and expand. Because I think one of the things about you know, choosing an option you want, or choosing a model and then choosing a vendor is, well, look, maybe out of the gate you don't get everything you want in the ideal solution, but you might get a starting point, and it might give you a starting point where you can expand out. And it could be a point solution like that pharmaceutical company I mentioned that expanded out from you know, a very tight business problem around accruals, to be able to expand out from that and integrate their finance systems with general ledger, and then maybe go out into operation control, out into analytics and other places. And what you might find is you might get backing for a smaller scale, tighter initiative that's linked to one of those kind of key issues in the organization that gets you to the starting point, that gets your project approved. So Mark, back to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Trevor. So let's get ourselves here to the last point in the flow here of, you know, how to step through and work your way into a you know, preparing a transformation project. So we've talked about the baseline, we've talked about setting the targets. Trevor outlined some of the different models and different vendor option types that you can consider. Now, no matter which path you take, what kind of goals you're pursuing, ultimately your success of your initiative, you know, hinges upon getting the right kind of support and buy-in from the organization, from the powers to be, right? That's ultimately the key in any project, in any transformation project, not just obviously payroll, is you need to get people behind what you're proposing, what you're trying to do. It's you know, you need to sell your vision and what you're looking to achieve internally. And so there's a few important things to look at. Number one, you know, for most payroll professionals running a big transformation project, especially, you know, running it across a multi-country or global organization, is not something that you would you know, end up doing on a daily basis. So you know, it's something that you might go through 2 or 3 times in your career. And so, you know, as you're going into this, learning from others and seeing how other you know, other members of the organization have succeeded running these kind of projects, getting these projects signed off, what the buy-in process was, what the decision path was, can be very powerful, right? So you don't have to reinvent the wheel and you know, sort of find out the hard way, geez, I should have gotten, you know, IT involved much earlier in the process, because you know, without them we really, you know, could get stuck further down the stretch. And that sort of leads to the next point. You know, it's obviously very critical to understand who are the decision makers, who are the people that need to get behind you. And sometimes, you know, depending on the organization, that can be quite difficult to understand. It's not necessarily the official reporting lines. In many organizations, there are people that you know, pull the strings and make things happen without having necessarily the official title. So understanding that organizational context, and then really understanding the you know, individuals in these roles of power and influence and their own motivations, right? What's really in it for them with the initiative that you're trying to drive. As Trevor mentioned, the example of the pharmaceutical company, that was transforming their reporting and analytics environment around their payroll function. The key stakeholder in this case was the head of finance, the CFO, and the CFO happened to have a big pain point in terms of how they were doing their accruals, their holiday accruals, and payroll happened to be in a perfect position to help resolve that issue. So understanding what the drivers are for not just people immediately in your functional area in payroll, but also the people around the function is super important. Trevor also talked a bit about sometimes it's easier not to, or in a lot of cases, it's easier not to try to bite off too much and maybe scope the transformation project to a size and an objective that is more digestible for the organization. So, historically, I think payroll transformation has always been viewed as we got to take everything apart. We got to change our local payroll vendors. We got to put in new technology, organizational changes that come with that. And in a lot of organizations, that's very hard to, drive those kind of big holistic change processes through the entire organization, especially if there's other projects already going on. If the organization has just gone through a big global HCM rollout or finance platform rollout, the appetite to yet take apart another function and reassemble it is probably going to be quite limited. So thinking about how can we shape this in a format where maybe step by step we can get to the end point. And get support for some of the quick wins that you can achieve without all the disruption, all the change that would come with such a big monolithic project. And then ultimately, in order to get the buy-in, you need to be able to demonstrate what's the value, right, to your stakeholders. What's the value to them through ideally fact-based, quantifiable business case. And in order to support your business case, sometimes that can also be then quite powerful if you have already run a small proof of concept somewhere that demonstrates the value in principle, and then can be extrapolated to get support to run that at a larger scale. And ideally, if you are able to structure your business case in a way where it can also tap into or link up with other initiatives that maybe have already budget allocated to them, that can become a powerful driver to get that lift up for your initiative. And then very tactically, again, kind of plays back to the first point, understanding how does the organization go through a process of executing this kind of transformation project. Who do you need to get on board in the procurement process, legal, IT, other stakeholders that need to all come together in order to make sure that all the boxes are ticked. In some organizations, that's a very formal process. In other organizations, it's a more loosely organized process, and especially if there isn't a clear template or guideline, it's very important that you do your research and understand, what are the steps and what are the people that need to be lined up to get the sign off and go through the procurement process.
Hey Mark, can I come into that business case point there, because this is kind of a little hobby horse of mine. Yeah, so I said at the beginning, the business case, a lot of people, you might put an awful lot of upfront effort into the business case and then realize that what you're trying to business case, the solution you're trying to business case, is never going to fly in the organization. So that's why I think it's very important, like this whole cultural dimension about how do we do things around here, how are initiatives signed off, what are the hallmarks of the successful ones. Very important to just do enough work up front on your business case. And test it around, because like often business cases, they're, you know, people can intellectually buy into, you know, the return on investment, the investment quantum, the net present value, the investment, and all of this other kind of great analytical stuff. But never get never get that cultural buy-in to socialize, because if you think about your solution, that business case is going to go through an iterative process, and what you want is a winning business case. Now, organizations often aren't very disciplined about looking back over business cases, because once you get to the start gate and your business case is approved, you know, looking back in 2, 3, 4 years time to see did you achieve all elements of your business case. Well, you know, some organizations are disciplined like that, a lot aren't. And guess what? The horse is bolted anyway, and you've achieved your change anyway. So if you want to get what you want, you know, make sure you take that more iterative, agile approach to your business case, socialize it, be aggressive about the numbers, because I guarantee your colleagues will absolutely be aggressive about their numbers, and, you know, get the change you want. You know, get it approved, get to the start gate, you know, get going. And like, if you don't deliver on every element of the business case, well, guess what? You have initiated a change, and you have made a positive change in the business. Because, you know, one of the key things, business cases are riddled with assumptions, you know, so make your assumptions, make it aggressive, socialize it, iterate it, but don't build a big, like, analytical kind of investment model up front without socializing it and expect it to be honed as you go through this process. So this is just one of my hobby horses where, you know, culture eats strategy for breakfast every day of the week. And just be tuned into that, because it's not an intellectual exercise. It's a cultural exercise with an intellectual component, which is the business case.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great place to end on as well, is, you know, yes, you do need to put your plan together. You need to have your facts straight and understand what's going on in the organization. But at the end of the day, you need to be pragmatic. You know, you want to drive to a decision. You want to, you know, change something, you want to move forward. You know, you can try to do a master thesis on, you know, a project plan and a business case that will never get the support. So you need to, you know, really just get focused on what does it take to get people lined up behind your initiative, have them support that decision, because ultimately, you know, that's really what you want to achieve. You want to get the decision pushed through to move forward, and then start to execute on that plan. So with that, I think that takes us to the end of our prepared remarks. So at this point, we'll open it up to any questions that people might have. And I see there's a few, I think, coming in on chat already. So let's take a look at those. Let's see. So let's see the first question here. I think someone mentioned making global payroll changes without ripping out existing infrastructure. How is this accomplished, or even possible, if I want to centralize control, reporting, and automation? So Trevor, you want to?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. So essentially, what we've done at Payzaar is we've built a platform that sits comfortably on top of your existing payroll landscape, and we did that. We designed it from the ground up, because we recognize there's an opportunity to help businesses to harmonize what they're doing, knowing that 80% of organizations have a mix of in-house payroll, third-party local payroll providers in country, and some regional players as well. But they also have this global need to be able to sit across the top of everything. So we designed the platform to be open, to connect easily, to move data around between the different components that feed the payroll operation and consume data from the outcome of payroll, like the GL going into your finance system. So we intentionally designed the application to sit on top like that. So we have a payroll model agnostic approach. You know, have payroll your way.
Perfect. All right, and here's another question. My specific issue is I'm trying to connect my HCM to my existing network. I assume this means network of existing payroll network. Can you help with this type of challenge? So existing payroll solutions, how do I connect that to my HCM platform? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, is that for me? Oh, yeah, sure. So look, if we think about HCM, it houses some of your payroll data, and but there's a lot of other sources of data that impact payroll along the way. So you may have, for example, some local benefits in country that you need to pull your payroll, you need to pull your HR data that impacts payroll and augment it with this other data that might come from a local benefit solution, or it could be local commissions or other local variable payments like equity or bonus or whatever it is. So we've built in Payzaar our HR Connect capability that allows you to pull that data together, to augment it, and then to transform it in a way that works with your existing payroll provider. So we've built the tools to be able to give you that capability to review your data, put it through approval processes before you send it off. So you apply your 4I principles and then give it to the local provider in the format that they need. And what does this do? This drives efficiency in the process. It detects data anomalies and issues that you can take care of. It should ultimately reduce your payroll cutoff times and drive accuracy in your payroll production, because that'll go into your either in-house local payroll system in the format it wants, or into your third-party local payroll vendor in the format that they want. So again, we know that people in global payroll and in payroll roles, they're spending 60-70% of their time preparing and checking data, and we've designed that part of our solution specifically to solve that problem. Reduce errors, reduce effort, and reduce cycle times through payroll.
Very good, very good. So maybe one last question before we wrap up. You talked about getting approval and touched upon who should be involved in any global payroll transformation to facilitate and exploit the changes necessary. How do you help drive the business case with all these stakeholders? So I think this goes back to what we talked about here at the end. Ultimately, first of all, understanding who the key stakeholders are that will be influencing and ultimately signing off on the transformation project decision, and understanding what their main pain points or concerns or objectives are is very important. So think of the CFO. Their concern in many cases will be around cost, obviously. What's the financial return? How quickly can we achieve an ROI? What kind of resources in the organization will be tied up? So being able to demonstrate that in your business case, what's the return on the savings or the improvements? I think if you're thinking about HR as another typical important stakeholder in a payroll transformation, from an HR perspective, in a lot of cases the concern is about the impact on the employees. Employee satisfaction and engagement is very important. Success criteria for any HR department, making sure that employees feel valued and well taken care of. And so, anything that can show how the employees will benefit, for example, through a better service experience. Self-service portal could be one of the things that you're looking to position and roll out. And so, if you can demonstrate how that's going to make the employee experience that much easier, more modern, get answers faster, that would be an example of supporting your transformation in terms of a business case with a stakeholder like HR or IT. In the context of IT stakeholders typically want to make sure that whatever solutions being put in place meets security and data protection standards. So emphasizing how your solution, how the future state will further improve information security and data protection obligations would be, be critical dimensions of articulating your business case to those stakeholders.
So Mark, there was just one other thing, just while we have everyone on the line here. Have a go, right? Because there's, you're never going to find out whether your initiative is going to fly or not without having a go in the first place. Even if you don't manage to succeed in putting the initiative on the table and getting it to the start gate this year, it might come up again in the budget cycle next year. And even in this organization, if you can't get it over the line, what will be interesting about the experience is you might come out of it a little bit bruised. But you know what? It's a massive learning experience and important to becoming a change agent for global payroll to have a go. Talk to your colleagues who've been successful with it before. Take a look at how they've gone about trying to navigate the organization and the politics and the culture, but have a go. If you never have a go, you never find out.
Excellent. I think that's a good place to end on. I know we're at the top of the hour here, so I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. Thanks, Trevor, for joining me as well. Hopefully you found it interesting. The recording will be made available within the next few days. And if you'd like to find out more about Payzaar, please reach out to us. You can find the information here on the last slides. We'll share the slides as well, and we look forward to being in touch with you again. Thank you so much.